Well, I'm Italian, that's the first thing I can say. I was raised in Italy. I've been living abroad for, well, by now, almost 20 years. The question about Italian, so I am an Italian theorist by definition. The question about Italian theory is at the same time a question, I guess, about the phenomenon of Italian theory. So I think I'm sort of like interested in what goes by that name, but I keep a certain distance, and I can try and explain why. On the one hand, I do believe that there are a number of Italian theorists who are very much worth reading and translating, which is what I'm doing on many occasions. On the other hand, I would say more generally that there is no such thing as Italian theory. Just to use like a modified version of Lacan's famous saying about sexual relationship. What do I mean by that? I do think that a number of Italian thinkers have become increasingly popular over the last 2 decades for good reasons, because they're worth reading, worth translating. Of course, Negri, Agamben, Esposito, Virno, but also we don't have to forget the social scientists, so the economists, Fumagalli, Marazzi, and then others, Lazzarato, etc. But there is also now in Italy, and it's important to remember in Italy and in Italian theory has been labeled Italian theory in English. There is an attempt to create a more unified field, right? And there are 2 components. I think the main component is coming from Esposito, Roberto Esposito, and people working with them. And the other component is coming from a more post-workerist Negrian tradition. And although I do know and respect both those groups, I think my background coming from psychoanalysis and a certain kind of Marxism is more dialectical. So maybe, you know, if you want to put together the existential question, do you consider yourself part of Italian theory? No, with the more theoretical part. Why? Because I think Italian theory does not take seriously, or at least, or even in a sense, tends to deliberately leave aside dialectics. And so maybe the Italian theorist I find myself closest to is Virno. Because Virno, in a sense, comes from the post-workerist tradition. It still maintains certain political categories, such as that of exodus, multitude, but he's not afraid of using words such as negation. He just published a book on negation, which I'm translating, and at times contradictions. Maybe dialectics is problematic for him too. And the other part of your question was about, what about people? I mean, do they see me as part of Italian theory? And I think at times they do, because of course I actually not only am Italian but at the same time live abroad. Lived in the UK for 16 years now. But I've actually I've edited collections, like 3 collections on Italian theory to promote Italian theory, but not as a kind of like homogeneous group. I just think my work as an editor of collections and as a translator, I translated Agamben, books by Agamben, I translated articles by Esposito, by Negri, and now translating books by Virno. So I guess, like, yes, it would be legitimate to see me as an Italian theorist, but I try to explain you why I'm an extimate presence, you know, like again, Lacan used to speak of extimacy, so you are inside, but you're also exterior to this phenomenon. I did my BA in Italy, and I got into philosophy and was so, in a way, like encouraged to continue. My background is philosophical, so I should specify that, even though I didn't deal with psychoanalysis and political theory, but my degrees are all in philosophy. So I studied philosophy in Italy in the mid-90s, and I was working with Pieraldo Rovatti, who's basically with Vattimo the most well-known thinker of, postmodernist thinker, translator, editor, friend of Derrida. So my schooling was actually, you might not even know it because I never say it, but was very much in deconstruction. So in the 90s, like Derrida, but also a lot of Foucault, especially the Foucault psychiatry. And then moving on chronologically, for me, I guess, a very important contact and teacher, if you can say so, somebody who believed in my ideas when I was still maybe not believing in them because I was very young, is Slavoj Žižek. And I really think like whatever you can say pro or against Žižek, I think he really marked an epoch philosophically, and as an intellectual also, he's one of the few public intellectuals we have nowadays, you know, like apart from Žižek, who? Maybe, well, Chomsky in a way, but Chomsky, Žižek, and it's difficult to have like a philosopher who's able to actually go on television and not be destroyed by the first question, you know. I admire Badiou very much, whom I know very little personally, whereas with Slavoj I know him. And as I said, maybe it's interesting to compare Slavoj and Badiou when they actually appear on television or write for papers. Badiou always remains a philosopher, whereas I think Slavoj, in his provocative way, manages to, catch the zeitgeist and be interesting and listen to, even if you don't come from an academic background. So initially I met Slavoj because I was one of the first to translate his works into Italian when I was still a student. And then he was a big support when I was a PhD student because he believed in the stuff I was writing, he gave me a possibility to publish. And yes, that relationship has been maintained. Although at times, you know, there are theoretical disagreements concerning especially some ontological aspects of Lacanian psychoanalysis. I always found like my debates with him very, very fruitful. So yes, that would be, the person was not, only part or not yet part of the history of philosophy I am most grateful to. And then you asked also about, people you didn't meet. So
yes.
Sure, I mean, we could go back to the beginning of philosophy, of course, but that's not so funny or so interesting. For sure, in all my work, I would say psychoanalysis is very important. So the work of Jacques Lacan is crucial. And I'm speaking as a philosopher here, and then you can speak also of my relationship with psychoanalysis. I mentioned Badiou already, and I would say these are the two contemporary philosophers whom I regard as more contemporary in 20th century, early 21st century, more relevant to my work. Yes. If you go back in time, I mean, maybe the book that made me when I was still finishing school, so in my late teens, the book that prompted me to do philosophy originally was, as for many people, I guess, The Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche. So that was my entrance into philosophy. As a student in Italy, I was very much into Derrida and Foucault. And my encounter with psychoanalysis was filtered through, let's say, a deconstructive approach to psychoanalysis, at least the theory of psychoanalysis, because I was actually in that deconstructive environment in Italy. And also, I was going to forget that, I wrote my first thesis in Italy and my first book in Italy, which was published in Italian, on the surrealist, we can debate whether he is a surrealist or not, poet and playwright Antonin Artaud. Mm-hmm. So I've not been working on Artaud for the last, I would say, 10 years or so. But even in terms of my encounter with psychoanalysis, Artaud has to do with it, because there is one specific moment when Lacan and Artaud cross. So Artaud was hospitalized as a paranoid schizophrenic, and then the definitions are different, and the young Lacan met Artaud and sort of like gave a diagnosis, and which turned out to be totally incorrect. He said that Artaud will actually live for other 40-50 years, but he will never write again a single word. They used to say, this guy is totally mad. And we know actually that the most interesting poetic work, which is also strongly ontological, of Artaud was written after his, so to speak, psychotic collapse, and it was also all concentrated in very few years before he died in the late 40s. So interestingly, maybe my first approach to Lacan and psychoanalysis came from a non-Lacanian context. I used to say deconstruction. Derrida's writing some psychoanalysis and the conflictual relationship Derrida had with Lacan, and then Artaud and this and this biographical anecdote. So that was my avenue into psychoanalysis. But ultimately, also I should mention, because this goes back to your first question, Italian theory, which was not then yet called in such a way, but certainly I found like Agamben's work, especially the work, because like the first trilogy, the works of the late 70s, such as Language and Death, for instance, or Stanzas, incredibly interesting. So, and I still think like that work, the early, the more dialectical, if you want to say, that Agamben is very, very convincing and interesting. And like in the mid-90s, I would say, when you read Agamben, and Agamben was and still is in a way in Italy marginalized by academia, it was very refreshing. The same kind of, feeling refreshed as you had with Zizek's work in the 90s. This is something different. Personally, I am not an analyst. I have been an analysand for several years. I'm not in analysis at the moment. So I have not practiced, but I've been, been on the couch in a way, and that is not happening at the moment. But you never stop being an analysand, like when you start. And I think for, especially if you come from philosophy, as I've just said, it is absolutely important to know what it feels, to put it very bluntly. And there's no way you can bridge the gap theoretically without experiencing it. You also asked whether I considered practicing, and the answer is yes, at least into, training and then practicing. But that was a desire that actually was, in a sense, suspended. I don't say deleted, who knows, but suspended precisely by being an analysand, And so my entrance into psychoanalysis had to do with the idea that I wanted to become an analyst, but temporarily at least I realized that was not for me. It's a tough job, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to do that job. Psychoanalysis as being historically and still is marginalized by academia. In a sense, even progressive, coincidentally progressive context, and one of them I could mention is the Department of Philosophy at Warwick in the early 2000s when I was reading my PhD. Even in those coincidentally progressive philosophical contexts, psychoanalysis has been generally marginalized. So what I'm interested in also, existentially in a way, biographically, is the fact that often psychoanalysis automatically puts you in the margin of academia, in a sense. What about the relationship with social theory or social sciences? Just to say something a bit more theoretical, psychoanalysis is a praxis, an innovative praxis that attempts to question the status of science. So even if you just stay within the debate, are social sciences sciences? How do they differ from, serious hard sciences, psychoanalysis is there to problematize that, because it has a intrinsic relation to science. The subject of psychoanalysis, Lacan says, is the subject of science, but at the same time it reminds science, modern science, so starting from Galileo, Newton, and up to our days, of its ambiguous status in relationship to the real. And here we can, open up a big debate, but let's keep it like that. I'm not sure I really answered your question, but the other important issue for me is in being, of course, interested in Marxism, in considering myself also in a way a Marxist, the question one often gets, but also one has to continuously ask oneself, is how one relates psychoanalytical praxis and theory to politics or political theory, or to be but using metapolitics as a philosopher, not politics but metapolitics. And the answer is, I think, in a sense, psychoanalysis is not intrinsically political. So I'm quite dubious and suspicious when one takes Freud or Lacan and applies them directly to politics. I think that is not the right methodological move. I think psychoanalysis, and especially Lacanian psychoanalysis, is fundamental in order to criticize classical ontology, think new ways in which to approach the question of ontology, and then from that standpoint think progressive politics in a new way. The other issue in this context I'm interested in, and I think we debated that in the seminars, is the question of philosophical anthropology, which has been marginalized, if not vituperated, for at least 50 years, that is to say, second half of the 20th century. The last explicitly philosophical anthropological project in Western European thought is the Critique of Dialectical Reason, SAP. And now we do have an attempt with Virno specifically, so we go back to Italian theory. Virno attempts, his own general project is in a sense a philosophical anthropology. Why am I saying that? Because I think if philosophy abandoned philosophical anthropology to then think politics, a thinker who did not abandon philosophical anthropology is Jacques Lacan. I think Lacan, in his own way, so not doing philosophy, maybe even doing anti-philosophy, in being a psychoanalyst, has been focusing on the question of philosophical anthropology.